now introduce Pam Richart.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you all for being here this evening. And we're really, really glad you came here to hear both sides talk about what we consider and call hazardous CO2 pipelines. I am the co-director of a nonprofit based in Champaign called Equal Justice Collaborative, but I'm also a lead organizer for the Coalition to Stop CO2 Pipelines that was founded shortly after Navigator began making presentations to the general public, and we realized, oh, this is something to pay attention to. So by now, you might be wondering, aren't these things really well regulated? And if so, why? If not, why not? Well, there are 3 entities that regulate pipelines. 2 of them, however, regulate CO2 pipelines, and 1 does not, and that happens to be FERC. The Illinois Commerce Commission does approve the route, and it does that based upon the plan that the pipeline developer submits. And that route is what establishes setbacks. And PHMSA, as you've heard, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials and Safety Administration, a real mouthful, does have the exclusive responsibility for addressing safety, and that includes the design, the construction, and the operation of those CO2 pipelines. But they have nothing to do with routing. They also have little oversight until there's a problem. And there was a problem. You heard about the Satarche incident, and many of you here know about that well. But that failure that occurred in February of 2020 caused the federal administration, PHMSA, to initiate a rulemaking process to improve safety and oversight of CO2 pipelines. As you heard the Navigator folks say, there are approximately 5,000 rather to 500, they said 5,500 miles of CO2 pipelines in this country. That's not a lot of CO2 pipelines. And you should know that this country has the most CO2 pipelines of any country in the world. There's not a lot of records to go on here because they're shorter. They have one point source versus pipelines like Navigator is proposing that have potentially 32 different sources they're going to try to route into their main trunk and control and manage it as they go along. So PHMSA recognized that existing regulations were inadequate. They were inadequate to protect those who live and who work near them. But we're concerned. We're concerned because we know the rulemaking is in process. We know these pipelines are hazardous, and yet Navigator is moving forward at this time without waiting for the rulemaking to be complete. Now, they said a lot today, and I don't doubt what they said about meeting or exceeding PHMSA standards. I applaud them for doing that. And while that's true, that represents standards in place today. It does not represent what PHMSA is going to propose during its rulemaking process. So what kind of things are they going to be, proposing? Well, they want to expand their regulations to address the fact that CO2 is not regulated in liquid form. And I want to share with you that much of Navigator's pipeline would be in liquid form. It is being reviewed as a supercritical pipeline by the federal government, but it's in liquid form, and there are questions about jurisdiction if something happened in that part of the pipeline. They also want to mitigate the standards, mitigate the pipeline fractures that you heard about that can release such large volumes of CO2. There are no federal standards for that. Right now we're working with best practices. They'll probably put in odorants. We've heard they will. They will set standards for limiting the maximum of impurities, which includes water, that can corrode the steel pipes. But most importantly, they will put standards in place for modeling that will accurately predict impact areas for purposes of identifying safe setbacks. Navigator says they will have to comply with the new regulations and don't have to wait. But Mark Maple says the obvious. If they don't do that, we'll have a problem here. So here is a quick slide that shows you the kind of grassroots resistance that's happening along their route. People are concerned about property rights, safety, and farmland impacts. Finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Not a whole lot about the fact that the Heartland Greenway Pipeline Navigator CO2 Ventures project is before the Illinois Commerce Commission at this time. And so I wanted you to know that they're at that point in the process where the various intervening groups and staff are looking carefully at the application, the testimonies, and have been things that I think are of interest. Number one is the fact that they have a case manager whose name is Mark Maple, and he has honed in on two areas of concern. One, I think, has to do with the lack of Navigator's success in being able to get the easements it needs to build this pipeline. You heard earlier that they've made 20,580 attempts to secure 1,100 easements. And Mr. Maple said he has never in his entire experience reviewed a lack of success rate at such a high ability to do that. So he says, quite frankly and quite honestly, that the ability to build a pipeline when you need to secure and use eminent domain for 86-point-something% of the land needed is not consistent with the purpose of eminent domain. And he recommends that the ICC, the commissioners who will make the decision, look very closely at that, because eminent domain is supposed to be used for projects when just a few landowners hold out, not when the vast majority of landowners oppose a project. And secondly, we are at the point where, when the slides left me here, that the ICC staff person, Mark Maple, has made a strong recommendation to deny Navigator's request for a certificate of authority to build a pipeline. Why? Why did they do that? He has based his comment on the basis of safety concerns, noting particularly that Navigator is not waiting for PHMSA's rulemaking process to be finished. So I want to underscore the fact, we're not here saying that pipelines can't be constructed in a way that those who do this for a living find is safe. What we're saying is, and Mark Maple said this, PHMSA itself, the federal government, has acknowledged that its rules are outdated and incomplete. And the necessary and the sensible thing to do is for Navigator to wait until PHMSA completes its rulemaking. And he concludes by saying this: the lives and the safety of Illinois residents must come before business interests and concerns. Yes. That's from the ICC. So we hope the county board is going to take the ICC's recommendations of denial and all of the testimonies and the intense opposition that you've heard here tonight in this evidence file, the things that I talked about earlier, into consideration as they deliberate on what to do next. And your decision is going to tell those in this room and beyond, and those who had to leave earlier, whether you support the lives and the safety of Illinois residents in Sangamon County above business